Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Tiny House Cooking. Today we're going to be making eggs Benedict. So let's get started. So I'm going to be cooking on a 2-burner Origo alcohol stove. It's a standalone unit, has no moving parts. It has 2 canisters inside that hold about a quart of fuel. We've got more than enough for this meal, so let's get cooking. So the first thing we're going to do is going to start making the bacon, because that's what takes about the most time. So usually you'd be using Canadian bacon here, but I'm using Trader Joe's bacon. It's their ends and pieces. It's a little less expensive and still no nitrates. So one of the ways that you can make it taste a little bit more like Canadian bacon is a little trick, which is putting some water in the pan before you get started, which kind of makes the bacon shrink a little bit less. That's my reverse osmosis filtration system down there. So we're going to heat the water up before we put the bacon into the pan. And that just leaves a little bit of moisture in there so it doesn't shrink quite as much. So you can see I probably put maybe a little bit less than a 1/4 inch in there of water, so we'll let that heat up. So in the meantime, let's get started cutting up our vegetables. So we're going to be having eggs Benedict with chopped up home fries, so let's do that. So I'm using 2 medium-ish sized potatoes, although my concept of medium might be a little skewed these days, so maybe they're smaller. Medium-small, we'll say medium-small potatoes. So we're going to chop those up. And you want to chop them into, the kind of size that you would expect to see in home fries, so small-ish, but not super tiny. Always helps to have very good sharp knives. Got good knives, but they're not very sharp right now, which is not the most fun thing in the world. I leave the skin on. If there's any really ugly blemishes, I might cut those off and chuck them in my compost, but for the most part, I just let nature do its thing. Ugly though it might be. Alright, so let's get our pan started to boil the potatoes. So once again, we'll take our good water from under here. And I really just want to put enough water in here to get these to steam, so I'm not gonna really fill it up very high. We want these to steam so they get just soft. If you cook them too much, then they taste a little too mushy, so we want to try to pull them off just as soon as they are soft, because they're going to go through another cooking process once we put the spices and the butter in with them. So I'm going to cover those and let them sit for a little bit. We'll also be using some onion in that when they are getting ready to have their spices and everything, so we'll cut that up as well so that we're prepared. Eggs Benedict is one of my very favorite meals as a kid, and I never really cooked it for way too long, and then one day I thought, I'm going to make this, and then I did. And I can't say it worked out the first time, or the second time, but by the 3rd or 4th time, it started tasting pretty good. I still have some issues with my hollandaise sauce separating, but hopefully today we will have success. So let's chop up our onion. So you're going to use about half an onion here, maybe a little bit less, using those 2 potatoes, so I'll probably go to about there and then add more if I need. So I'm just going to put this into a little bowl here. Great! So you can see now our water is starting to boil, so it's just about ready to put the bacon in. I think that might be maybe just a little bit too much water, so I'm just going to take a little bit out. We just want enough to, that's probably good, to soak into the bacon so that it stays a little bit larger and doesn't shrink so much. So we'll just put that straight into the hot water. Then you want to make sure that your water at this point is boiling pretty well here. Of course, when you put the bacon in, it'll calm down a little. Alright, so tiny pan, tiny amounts of bacon. We're probably just going to leave it at that. So the water is going to completely reduce so that it's no longer there, and at some point you will still end up with the grease, your bacon grease, but you'll end up with less of it than you would have if you started with it just in a straight hot pan with no water at all. So while we've got those 2 going, we can get ready for our next step. So we'll talk about how we're going to make the home fries here. So once these are fully softened, not completely softened of course, we're going to start a new pan. We're going to get some butter in there, we're going to get it real hot, and we're going to put our onions in to start out. Then we're going to add some paprika and some chili powder. Those are going to kind of give it its flavor. And of course, a bunch of butter, because nothing would be complete without butter. I use Kerrygold butter. It's from grass-fed cows in Ireland. And if you haven't tried this butter, you may just wonder what you've been eating all these years that they call butter. It's really, really good. But of course, any type of butter that you're using will work just fine. Okay, so after about 10 minutes or so, our potatoes are starting to look pretty good. They're not completely soft, but they're still giving me a little resistance, but they're just about right. So we're going to drain them and put them aside for a minute while we get the rest of the potatoes started. So we have a limit of pans and also places to put things. Just going to slap those right in here. They can sit there for a minute. Our bacon is also starting to sizzle down pretty nice. If you look over here, you can see that it's pretty much gone through all the water now. We're just dealing with the little bit of bacon grease there. It's shrank a lot less than normal, so turn that on pretty low and that'll be done soon. So these operate pretty simply. When you turn the knob on one of these, there's a little metal plate that either covers or opens the flame there. So when you turn it all the way off, that extinguishes it, and when you turn it all the way open, then it's fully able to touch the bottom of your pan. So it's pretty simple. It doesn't give you the best control in the world, but it does work. So now that we've got our potatoes out, we're going to take the same pan that we cooked them in, and we're going to get started with the next step here. So I know that we're going to need half a stick of this, a whole half of the stick, good lord, to make our hollandaise sauce. So I'm going to dedicate that first, just about there or so. No math around here, heaven forbid. We'll just take a chunk of this and throw it into our pan. Let that melt down a little, and then we will throw our onions in. Ever so slightly burnt the bottom of this pan. Don't tell your friends. Alright, so our butter's not completely melted down, and we're going to throw our onions in. In go the onions. We want to let those sizzle around a little. Get over the point where they're relatively brown before we go to put the rest of our potatoes in. Let's check our bacon here. It's probably getting pretty close to done. Just want to make sure all those white bits are cooked thoroughly, but maybe not quite as crispy as every day, because we want this to be nice and thick. Now, if I had a third burner, I would have been starting to melt the butter to make the hollandaise sauce at this point, but because I only have two, then I am waiting for these two to be done. There's actually only a few meals that I would cook in this kitchen that would really be helpful with an extra burner. For the most part, I seem to make it work pretty well with just the two. This is one of those ones where it would help to have just one more burner. We do actually have a third burner. It's one of these just pretty much cut in half. It's just a single burner by Origo, but I'm trying to just make it the way I would normally make it, which is just to wait a little bit longer. So this is starting to get a little translucent. It'll start to get browned pretty soon. And another thing I'll do if the potatoes aren't completely cooked through, if they may need a little bit more cooking, which these could probably use, is just to put a little lid over the container that they're sitting in before they go back into the pan, so it can help them soften up just a little bit before they go in. But you really don't want to overcook those. When they're done, they'll end up tasting a little mushy and mashed, which is not what we're going for with French fries here. Alright. So we're starting to see a little bit of color in these onions. I'm going to dump the potatoes in here. We're just going to let these two chill out in the pan here for a while, so we get a little bit more color. And now I'm going to put in my paprika and my chili powder. So you're going to put in a goodly amount of each one, I'd say. Good dash. You can also put cayenne in there if you're a fan of spice. I'm an absolute spice wuss. I do put a little bit. I put the tiniest amount. This will put in a little tiny dash. gosh, I'm really talking tiny. Tiny house, tiny. That was it. You missed it? There wasn't much. Get these stirring. Great, so you can see they kind of take on the look there of your home fries that you'd be used to seeing in your diners or whatever. And really, once your onions are fully cooked and you maybe get a little bit of browning in there, you're pretty much done with those. Okay, I think the bacon is falling. No, the bacon's not falling. Everything else is falling. Alright, I'm going to call that done. So let's get a plate and a paper towel. And we will get the fat off of these. Since we're in a gray water system, we let our bacon fat harden and then throw it away. You want to make sure that doesn't go down your sink, especially on a gray water system. With any kitchen really, but especially if you have gray water. Also, I found that dogs will do wonderful things for bacon grease. Okay, so I'm going to put this aside now. Tend to my potatoes, and then we can get started on the hollandaise. Okay, so we're really getting some color in there, and these are probably just about done now. So I want to put some salt and some pepper in at the end. A couple of grinds. And I'm going to just let that sit on this burner here. If I notice it a little bit dry in there, which I think it is at the moment, I'm going to add just a little bit more butter. Whoever said it's better with butter must have been right. That saying is very near and dear to my heart. Alright, so I'm just going to cover this. I'm going to turn this burner off. Alright, so let's start melting our butter for our hollandaise. So I'm going to take this big half a stick here. I'm going to slap it right on there. So I've got this on low. You really don't want your butter to burn. I don't actually know what it is that makes my hollandaise sauce separate, but I have a theory that one of the possible components is burnt butter. So don't burn the butter. Alright, so we're going to use a hand blender for this, which is an indispensable tool in any kitchen, especially in my tiny house. So the key with using a hand blender for making anything that's supposed to be emulsified, like mayonnaise, which I make on a regular basis, or different kinds of salad dressing and hollandaise as well, is you want to make sure that whatever container you're making it in is only very slightly larger than the diameter of your immersion blender there. So see, this one actually could even be a little bit smaller. It's a little bit large. You can kind of move around in there. Ideally, you would want it to have basically no wiggle room at all, because that helps make the whole process much easier. Alright. This will take a couple minutes. Alright, the butter has now settled into this pretty well, and these look about like the kind of home fries that I would want to eat. So I'm going to put the lid on these. I'm actually going to transfer them over here now. And I'm going to start boiling the water to make our poached eggs. So let's use our good water here. You can hear the butter starting to crackle over there. Okay, water started for eggs. This doesn't have an automatic light, as you may have noticed. I'm using just a little butane lighter every time I need to turn it on because there is no automatic ignition, but it's not too terrible. This is actually magnetized, and we have some magnets up there, so it goes nicely out of the way if you need it to be. Alright, so now I'm going to get the inside of here all started. So we're going to use 2 egg yolks here. I have these really delicious eggs that come from my neighbor. I'm very lucky. So they are pastured, organic, delicious eggs, which is wonderful. If you have access to local eggs, I really recommend using them. The yolks here are so unbelievably orange. Kind of do the same thing as the butter does and make you wonder, what is you've been eating? They're just so darn good. So 2 yolks separating the whites. And if you have any meringue projects, anything like that, then these whites will be very useful. Alright, so we've got our 2 nice dark orange yolks in there. And we're going to put our spices in and our lemon juice before we get started. So I have a little bit of a Meyer lemon here. Our lemons are extra sweet and delicious. So I think I might use a little bit less lemon juice than most recipes I've seen call for, just because I want to give it a little bit of tartness, but not too terribly much. Put that in our compost. Although personally, I like eating the peel on my lemons because they are so delicious and sweet. So we're going to put our spices in. So I'm going to put some chili powder. I'm going to put some paprika. And if you'd like, you can put a tiny dash of cayenne pepper. More if you are more brave with the spices. That was really ridiculously small. Okay, so the butter here is just about getting the point you want it to be. And we're going to put a little, maybe just a half grind of salt in there. And now as soon as this butter has melted, we are going to blend it all up in there. So just plug your hand blender in here, plug it into your wall. And I like to blend the yolks a little bit by themselves before the butter goes in. So mine has an adjustable top here, so you can put it on low or high. I pretty much always use high. So I'm going to put it in here on high, and I'm going to blend this together until it starts looking pretty good and frothy. Probably about like that's enough. So our butter now is bubbling and looking just perfect. So I'm going to turn that off. And while this is blending, I'm going to very slowly, or somewhat slowly, pour this butter in here. You can make hollandaise in a pan, but this just seems a lot easier to me. Oh good, it didn't separate. Good for us. So it should look about like that, which is rich and thick and creamy and extremely delicious. All right, so we can let that sit here just a little bit. And our water is now starting to get pretty ready there. So what we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna start heating up our bread. I don't have a toaster oven in my house because I don't have enough power to run a toaster oven. If you were to plug a toaster oven into one of these beautiful outlets, it would shut everything off. So I have to heat my bread up in a pan instead. So that's what we're gonna do. And this is pretty heavy and serious, I would say, as far as Eggs Benedict goes, as far as the other things, the accoutrements that are going with this. So I want to try to make a lesser amount, I suppose, between all the butter of the hollandaise sauce and everything. So we're just going to make one open-faced piece of bread with the egg on it and everything instead of the traditional two, as you would with an English muffin. So the bread that I'm using is organic sprouted sourdough bread, sprouted wheat. This is just what I like, but anything will do, really. If you want to use the traditional English muffin, that's perfectly fine, too. Alright, so we really just want enough butter to kind of get it on the pan so that the bread doesn't stick and it has something to allow it to brown. So once that's hot and bubbly, which it's pretty much right now, we're just going to stick the bread right here into the pan. It doesn't exactly fit, so we have to flip it once or twice as it's cooking. But we'll just kind of leave that here for a moment. Okay, so our water is getting pretty boiled here. So one trick that I learned from the UK, where they really love poaching their eggs, is to put a little bit of vinegar in before you put in your eggs, and that helps to keep them from sticking to the pan. Okay, so let's just keep swishing our bread around here in the pan. Obviously, if you had a toaster oven, life would be much easier. Alright, so I really want to make sure that this water is at a rolling boil before I put those eggs in. So we're going to take 2 more of our eggs. Sometimes when you get the fresh ones from somebody's backyard, you'll get blue ones. Or you'll get giant ones that have double yolks in them. It's very exciting. Alright. So this water's just about getting there. The bread is taking its time. You should probably use something other than your fingers here, but I tend not to learn from my mistakes. Okay, this water's looking pretty good now, so I'm going to put these eggs each in. And I've seen people crack them in a cup first so that they don't split or something like that. But I just kind of try to be as careful as I can and talk to them while I put them in. Don't crack, don't split, don't break yolk. All right, great. So we really just want this bread to be kind of warm enough, hot enough for this whole process, so that's looking pretty good now. So I am going to go and get out my plate, get ready to start putting everything together. So, put this on our cutting board here. Get the excess bacon grease off the bottom of this plate. Okay, so I'm going to slap some potatoes on there. Made a little bit extra, because I like to have these for later. Yum. All right. So, our eggs are probably getting pretty close. Our bread is about done, so I'm going to put the bread down, turn this burner off, put the nice, more brown side up. So I have a slotted spoon somewhere. One, which will help me get a handle on this. So these did stick just a little bit. Ah, and this one's separated. I mean, not separated, but it did open. All right, we're just gonna slap this little guy right there on there, so we don't lose any more of our yolk. So I'm gonna put the bacon down first, and then one addition that I like to add, or I guess two additions. One of them is alfalfa sprouts, or any kind of sprouts really, make a delicious addition to Eggs Benedict. So we're going to plop some of those on there. So put our sprouts in our sprouts. We'll put our egg directly on top there. Okay, this one isn't quite done. I'm just going to let that one sit in there for just another second. So another thing that I like to do is to put some avocado on here. In California, as we are. Let's see if this is a good one. It's avocado roulette, my friends. Not too bad. Alright, so we're going to scoop some of this on there. You can put it on top of your egg, or you can put it on before. Really up to you. I kind of like the way it looks on top there. And I'm just going to put a little dash of salt. Unsalted avocado really has no comparison. Great, now I'm going to scoop out my other egg, put it on its beautiful bed of sprouts there, and let's put some more avocado on top of this one. Alright, so just our little bit of salt. Great. And then I'm going to pour the hollandaise sauce on. So this has gotten all nice and rich and creamy. So let's mix this up and pour it right on. This is an extra thick batch. Always good. And we always end up with a little extra, so I just put it in a little bowl on the side so that you can do any dipping that you would like to do. That's all the potatoes as well. Okay, great. So I'm going to put a little bit of pepper on top of everything here. A little bit more on those potatoes. And that is about it. We are ready to eat Eggs Benedict. There's your finished product. Should be pretty tasty. Thanks for joining us and hope to see you next time. It's not for puppies. That's not for puppies.